Timpf has always been the kind of TV personality who leaves audiences guessing. Sharp-witted, fearless, and unafraid to joke about any topic, she built her career by being unapologetically herself. But what most viewers never realized is that behind the sarcasm and humor was a love story that almost didn't happen. One that remained hidden in plain sight. And the reason it stayed hidden for so long is something even longtime fans never saw coming. Because while Kat talked openly about politics, culture, and comedy, there was one thing she always treated like a fragile secret: her personal life. And that secret began with a relationship no one expected her to pursue. For years, people assumed Kat wasn't interested in settling down. She said it in interviews, joked about it on air, and lived like someone fully focused on her career. That image became part of her identity. But beneath the confident personality was a deeper truth, one that almost no one in her audience understood. Kat wasn't avoiding love. She was afraid of it. Past experiences had left her cautious, guarded, and convinced that any serious relationship would eventually fall apart. So when someone quietly entered her life and didn't try to change her, pressure her, or fix her, it didn't just surprise Kat, it terrified her. The most shocking thing? Her closest friends later admitted they never saw it coming. Kat wasn't the type to gush about someone new. She didn't bring her dating life into the spotlight. And she certainly didn't let the public know she was beginning to feel something deeper than she expected. But behind the scenes, a connection was forming that didn't fit her usual pattern. Felt easy, felt stable, felt real. And that's the part of Kat Timpf's love story that audiences missed completely. The quiet shift from independence to vulnerability. This change didn't happen overnight. Kat resisted it, pushed it away, and even joked about being undateable long after their bond started to deepen. But the quiet truth was undeniable. The person who would eventually become her husband saw through her defenses, even the ones she thought were impenetrable. And that ability to see the real Kat was something she had never fully experienced before. It made her pause. It made her rethink everything. It made her wonder if love was something worth risking after all. What makes the story even more compelling is how determined she was to protect it. Kat knew the media would twist whatever they could. She knew audiences would speculate. And she knew the public pressure could easily break something that was still fragile. So she did something rare in the world of television personalities. She kept the relationship completely private. Almost no one outside her inner circle knew what was happening. And that secrecy created the foundation for something lasting. It wasn't just a love story forming. It was a transformation. Kat Timpf, the woman who hid behind humor and wit, slowly found someone who made her feel safe enough to be herself without the mask. And that hidden journey is what makes the next chapter of their story even more unexpected. Kat Timpf never believed in love at first sight. She said it on podcasts, repeated it on live TV, and joked that anyone who used the phrase was probably ignoring red flags. But the moment she met the man who would later become her husband, something unusual happened. Something she couldn't immediately explain. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't the kind of moment that sweeps someone off their feet. It was quieter, almost ordinary. And yet it would become the beginning of a romance that unfolded almost entirely out of the public eye. It started with a simple conversation, one of those chance interactions that feel random at the time but make perfect sense when looking back. Kat wasn't expecting anything. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't playing a part or hiding behind her sharp humor. And because she wasn't performing, the person she met was able to see something most viewers never do. The real Kat, unfiltered and off-camera. He didn't know her as the Fox personality. He didn't see her as the tough, sarcastic commentator who could turn any situation into a witty punchline. He saw her as a woman who was surprisingly open, surprisingly warm, and surprisingly vulnerable. And that's where everything shifted. That one conversation led to another, then another. And even though Kat refused to admit it at the time, she felt something. Something that made her nervous in a way she hadn't felt in years. She later joked that it annoyed her how easy it was to talk to him. Easy wasn't supposed to happen. Easy meant danger. Easy meant possibility. And Kat was used to guarding herself, not letting someone slip past her defenses with nothing more than sincerity and patience. What makes the story even more unexpected is how quickly trust began to build. Not the kind of trust you talk about openly, but the quiet kind. The kind that forms when someone listens without judgment, asks nothing in return, and doesn't flinch at your flaws. Kat wasn't used to that. She wasn't used to someone showing up with calm instead of chaos. And that's exactly why she kept it hidden. Their connection grew in the spaces no one paid attention to. Late-night conversations, inside jokes, spontaneous moments that didn't require an audience. Kat made sure the cameras never caught it. She made sure her colleagues stayed unaware. She even admitted later that keeping the relationship secret felt strangely liberating, like it was the one part of her life that didn't belong to the public. And her husband? He never tried to pull her into the spotlight. He didn't chase attention. He didn't post photos. He didn't brag about dating someone famous. Instead, he protected the privacy she valued most. And because he didn't demand anything, Kat found herself giving more than she expected. Sharing fears, memories, and pieces of herself she usually hid behind humor. That chance encounter became the foundation of something steady, genuine, and quietly powerful. And even though the world didn't know it was happening, those hidden early moments shaped a love story that would eventually surprise everyone, including Kat herself. For years, audiences watched Kat Timpf fearlessly speak her mind on national television, often with a boldness that made her both admired and criticized. But the man she married? He was nothing like the chaotic, controversial world she lived in. And that contrast is what shocks most people when they learn the truth about him. Because while Kat became a familiar face in the media, her husband stayed almost invisible, a quiet presence with a far bigger impact on her life than anyone realized. Most viewers assumed Kat would marry someone as outspoken and fiery as she was. Someone in media, someone political, someone loud. But the truth is the opposite. Her husband, Cameron Frisha, came from a world built on discipline, structure, and loyalty, a military background, calm equanimity, a steadiness that Kat herself often said she lacked. And that difference between her whirlwind personality and his grounded one became the foundation of their bond. But the real surprise isn't where he came from. It's who he turned out to be behind closed doors. People think they know Kat because she's on their screens almost every night. They assume her husband must fit into that same world. But he didn't care about fame. He didn't care about opinions. He didn't care about the spotlight that followed Kat wherever she went. In fact, he spent most of their early relationship staying as far away from that spotlight as possible, by choice. What shocked Kat the most wasn't his calm demeanor. It was his patience. Kat is used to being challenged, debated, questioned, and pushed. That's the nature of her career. But Cameron didn't approach her that way. He wasn't trying to win a point or score a joke. He listened in a way Kat had never experienced, not with passive agreement but with genuine interest. And that kind of attention disarmed her more than any heated debate ever could. This dynamic created a relationship that looked nothing like the version of Kat fans thought they understood. Off-screen, Kat wasn't the constant jokester. She wasn't the tough-talking commentator. She wasn't the person who always had a snappy comeback ready to fire. Around him, she was quieter, softer, more open. And that's the part of her personality most viewers never realized existed. But what might be the biggest surprise of all is how their differences didn't cause friction. They created balance. Kat's unpredictability met Cameron's predictability. Her anxiety met his calm. Her public life met his private nature. And rather than pulling her away from her career, that balance strengthened her. Friends noticed she became more confident, more stable, more centered, and she openly credited her husband for helping her find that sense of grounding. Yet another surprising truth: Cameron had his own struggles. Being married to someone in the public eye isn't easy. There were moments when he felt the weight of online criticism, even though he never sought attention. But instead of letting that pressure create distance, he used it to understand Kat's world better and stand by her more firmly. The result is a marriage that defies expectations. A union built not on spotlight compatibility, but on emotional chemistry. Not on shared careers, but on shared values. not on loud declarations but on quiet understanding. And the deeper their relationship grew, the more clear it became that viewers only knew a fraction of Kat's reality. And that private reality becomes even more revealing when you look at the struggles they faced. Struggles that stayed hidden until now. On television, Kat Timpf looked unstoppable, confident, sharp, and quick enough to turn any tense moment into a joke. But behind closed doors, her marriage wasn't as effortless as it might have seemed. What most viewers never realized is that Kat and her husband faced challenges early on that could have ended the relationship before it truly began. And the world would have never known it happened. One of the biggest hurdles came from something Kat rarely admits. She struggles deeply with anxiety. Anyone who has watched her on TV would assume she thrives under pressure. But in her private life, anxiety wasn't just a passing moment. It was a constant presence. Her husband walked into that reality without any guidebook, without fully understanding how heavy that burden could be. And that misunderstanding created early tension neither of them expected. When Kat felt overwhelmed, she shut down. Cameron came from a disciplined, structured world, where problems were solved quickly, directly, and logically. Anxiety doesn't work that way, and learning that was a shock to him. He wanted to help, he wanted to fix things, but sometimes his instinct to solve only made Kat retreat further. The misunderstanding wasn't rooted in conflict. It was rooted in fear. Kat's fear of being misunderstood and Cameron's fear of not being enough for her. But that wasn't the only challenge. Being married to someone in the public meant every rumor, every online insult, every social media attack had the potential to spill into their home. Kat was used to criticism. She built a career on surviving it. But Cameron wasn't. He never sought public attention, and he didn't expect the internet to come after him simply for being the man Kat chose. Some comments targeted his past. Some targeted his character. Some questioned his motives. And even though he kept silent publicly, those attacks weighed on him privately. This pressure created moments of distance. Nights when Kat felt guilty for dragging him into a world he never asked for, and moments when Cameron struggled with the idea that he had to remain strong even when he was quietly hurting. But the surprising thing is how these struggles ultimately defined their bond. Instead of breaking them apart, the pressure pushed them into deeper honesty. Conversations that were once uncomfortable became necessary. They learned each other's emotional language. Kat learned to communicate instead of withdraw, and Cameron learned to support instead of fix. Yet perhaps the biggest challenge came from something even fewer people knew. Kat never believed she was marriage material. Not because she doubted her husband, but because she doubted herself. She feared that one day he would see the unfiltered version of who she was, her anxieties, her insecurities, her unpredictable moods, and decide it was all too much. She confessed this fear quietly, in moments only he heard, and every time he responded with the same steady reassurance. He wasn't going anywhere. That stability became the lifeline Kat didn't even know she needed. Their marriage didn't grow through perfect moments. It grew through the messy ones, the misunderstandings, the tears, the late-night conversations that forced them to confront who they really were as individuals. The struggles that could have broken them instead became the glue that held them together. And because almost none of these challenges ever reached the public eye, fans never knew how much work went into building the marriage they see today. But what might be the most surprising revelation of all is how those struggles shaped the reality of their relationship now. Something that looks vastly different from the early days, and in ways no one predicted. Today, Kat Timpf and her husband live a reality that almost no one could have predicted. Not her fans, not her colleagues, and not even Kat herself. After all the secrecy, the doubts, the private struggles, and the intense contrast between their personalities, their marriage has become something unexpectedly strong and surprisingly ordinary in the best possible way. It's the kind of stability Kat never believed she would have, and the kind viewers would never guess she quietly depends on. What shocks people most is how grounded Kat has become since getting married. Not in the sense of losing her edge. She's still the same quick-witted personality audiences know, but in the sense that she finally has a space where she doesn't have to perform. At home, there's no pressure to be on, no expectation to be sarcastic or clever, no need to deflect seriousness with humor. Her husband gives her a freedom she rarely finds in the public side of her life. And she's admitted more than once that this stability changed her in ways she didn't think were possible. But their marriage isn't built on dramatic gestures or picture-perfect routines. It's built on small moments, quiet mornings, shared jokes, conversations that don't need to be profound to matter. And ironically, it's those simple, almost boring moments that Kat cherishes the most. After years of chaos, unpredictability, and a life defined by public scrutiny, the thing she values most is the ordinary rhythm they've created together. What viewers don't see is how much her husband supports her behind the scenes. He helps her decompress after intense shows. He listens, really listens, when she's overwhelmed by the constant noise of public life. He reminds her that she doesn't need to be perfect, or fearless, or endlessly witty to be loved. And that reassurance has become a cornerstone of their marriage. What's even more surprising is how much Kat supports him, too. People often assume she's the dominant personality in the relationship, but behind closed doors, it's far more balanced. She takes his emotional needs seriously. She defends him fiercely when online criticism tries to paint him as a character rather than a person. And she has admitted privately that her biggest priority is protecting the safe space they've built together. Another unexpected twist in their marriage is how rarely they bring their relationship into the public eye. At a time when most celebrity couples share everything online, from vacation photos to personal milestones, Kat and her husband choose the opposite. They protect their privacy with a level of discipline that surprises many fans. They rarely post pictures. They rarely talk about their marriage publicly. And they avoid letting the media define their relationship. For Kat, that privacy isn't just a preference. It's a form of protection, a way of keeping the most important part of her life untouched by the chaos of fame. But perhaps the biggest surprise of all is this. Despite all her earlier fears, Kat Timpf is genuinely happy. Not the performative everything's fine happiness people show on social media. Real happiness. Steady happiness. The kind that comes from building a life with someone who accepts every imperfect part of you and chooses to stay anyway. Their marriage today is a quiet success story. Not the glamorous kind, not the dramatic kind, but the kind built on trust, communication, humor, and resilience. And the reason viewers never saw it coming is simple. Kat Timpf and her husband didn't fall into love. They built it piece by piece, in all the moments no one ever saw. In the end, Kat Timpf's love story isn't surprising because it's dramatic. It's surprising because it's real. For someone who built her public identity on sharp humor, bold opinions, and an unpredictable edge, the true twist was finding a kind of love that didn't need an audience. A marriage built not on flashy headlines, but on the quiet, steady moments that reveal who a person really is. Her husband didn't fall for the TV personality. He fell for the woman behind it, the one most viewers never see. And together, they've created a life that defies expectations. Private, grounded, imperfect, and honest. A life where Kat can finally take off the armor she wears on air and just be herself. Their journey wasn't simple, and it definitely wasn't effortless. But that's exactly why it worked. Through fears, misunderstandings, and the pressure of public scrutiny, they learned to communicate, to listen, and to grow. Not in front of cameras, but behind closed doors. And today, the love story Kat Timpf once believed she'd never have has become the most stable, surprising, and meaningful part of her life. A reminder that even the most outspoken personalities can hold their most beautiful truths in silence. And that sometimes, the most unexpected romances turn out to be the ones worth protecting.